Today is International Women's Day. It is not only an opportunity to celebrate women, but also an opportunity to highlight the struggles women around the globe still face. In Iran, for example, the situation is still very dangerous for women, especially given the controls of the so-called morality police. We have this exclusive report now from Tehran and have blurred the faces of people appearing in the report for their own safety.
This would have been impossible just 6 months ago. Walking the streets of Tehran in your own choice of clothing. Now it's not an uncommon sight anymore. Like this university student, many women are taking the risk, but it's still against the law. So to talk about it, we go inside.
There were many reactions to me not wearing the hijab. People looking at me, pulling faces, or even coming up and insulting me, humiliating me, or very kindly and sentimentally advising me on what they consider right. But my biggest achievement from that period was that I became normal in the eyes of those around me.
Here in one of Tehran's posh shopping malls, it's plain to see women wearing whatever they want in friendly coexistence, refusing to be divided by the Islamic Republic's ideology, no matter what they've chosen for themselves personally.
I feel that this is how I show my religious identity to people. I'm fine with this, I'm comfortable. But I think that if I don't fight for the individual freedom of the person sitting next to me, I'm actually destroying freedom. If someone who doesn't think like me or dress like me doesn't have freedom, then I don't have freedom either. Because freedom is not for anyone if it's not for everyone.
And so in the past 5 months, many religious women have joined the protest as well as men, not fighting against the hijab, but for freedom, equality, and the right to choose. It's the mandatory hijab that they see as a tool for oppressing women.
I personally would not wear the hijab. In my opinion, this practice of not wearing it doesn't just mean that we are now physically freer or so on. It's actually a form of resistance, and the issue of the hijab has taken on a special meaning.
A special meaning most people here in Tehran seem to either share or at least no longer mind, highlighting that the rift is not among Iranians, but between them and their leaders.
And earlier I spoke with Nagin Shirakai, an activist for women's rights. I asked her where the government's crackdown on that protest movement stands today, 6 months after the demonstrations began over the death of a woman in custody of the so-called morality police.
It's still ongoing, unfortunately. The thing is, the protests on the streets changed, so we see less protests, but the resistance, as you obviously portrayed beautifully in your report, is ongoing. So women taking to the streets without wearing hijab, that's the way of resistance that is ongoing. Also, there are other forms of smaller protests that's happening around. But government's brutally cracking down all of it. And the important thing to understand is that the technique they're using to crack down. So we've seen a lot of cases of rape and sexual assaults that's happening inside prisons. People being arrested, even now, like there are daily arrests that are happening for people who are not doing anything in terms of resistance, but might done something in the past. But the threats and the arrests ongoing to make sure that they can control the government. At the same time, we are seeing the poisoning cases that makes the people really worry, and they see that as another way of oppression, that the government has a hand in it and actually trying to punish young girls and boys for their disobedience at a school. So it's a really complex picture. Struggles continues, and I think the fight continues on the ground on a daily basis, even though it's not in the form of protest.
Tell us a little bit more about that fight, because, of course, today is International Women's Day. Today's attention, the attention in general, do you anticipate that the protest movement is re-energized?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Since yesterday, the number of, the manifestos and laws being written by women inside Iran and outside Iran, the network that has been created across the globe, and specifically on the grassroots level in Iran, is vibrant and alive. And within the last 24 hours, and hopefully today, we are seeing a lot of, the outcome of those network building, collaboration between grassroots level activists coming out to the picture and to the mainstream. And it's really amazing to see that how the resistance on the streets and the protests on the streets took a different level. And it's now going much deeper and adding the intellectual background and backing to it, and creating a much more, in my view, much more lasting resistance that would lead to the toppling of the Islamic Republic.
What is your message to the international community? What would you like people to know about what is happening in Iran?
I think they need to care about this, because it's the calls and the ideas around women life freedom is something that anyone all around the globe can relate to, because we are all living in a world that oppresses women in one form or another. We see the women losing their autonomy over their body, even in the Western countries. As well as there was news today that the pension gap, gender gap, is massive still. So these are the things that are alive and central to our lives right now. The environmental rights that's coming from life, part of the women life freedom. Climate change is a massive issue, and we should face it, and we should talk about it globally. It's not an issue that you can resolve on a national level or a nation-state level. It needs a local, global approach to it, as well as the liberty that we all celebrate. So I want to invite everyone to read about it, become more knowledgeable about what's happening, and talk about it. Awareness is the key to change the world.
Negin Shirakai, an activist for women's rights, joining us today on this International Women's Day, speaking specifically about the situation in Iran for women. Thank you so much. In some other parts of the world, International Women's Day is being used to take a stand against gender-based discrimination. In Afghanistan, around 20 women held this rare sit-in demonstration in the city of Mazar-e-Sharif. They called on the Taliban to reopen the doors of schools, universities, and offices for women. They risk arrest, violence, and social persecution for taking this kind of action. Now, the Taliban has faced global criticism for imposing a slew of restrictions on girls and women in the country since seizing power in 2021. And DW's Michaela Kufner spoke with German Family Minister Lisa Paus in New York. She asked what can be done to help women in places like Afghanistan, Iran, and other parts of the world where women are struggling to win long-denied rights.
Minister Paus, on International Women's Day here at the United Nations, you're also meeting women from Afghanistan, from Iran. What do Western nations, what does Germany, Europe have to offer women who are under acute repression, as in Afghanistan and Iran at this very moment in time?
Well, we have to look at them, and we have to raise interest in them. Their situation is not acceptable. They are violated, they are discriminated, they are punished, they are put into jail, they are murdered. And so it's important at every meeting, here or on every other meeting, that we send the message, we see that, and we do not talk about it, but we mention it, and we are standing side by side with those women and are in strong solidarity.
Women leaders meeting here are talking about something called digital oppression of the future. What exactly does that mean?
we see that the feminist perspective in this digital work is still lacking. And therefore this meeting is so important because we put now in the female perspective in the digitalization on the complete agenda. And we learned already that artificial intelligence can be very good to solve problems, but also can even strengthen or make more deep discriminations we have, because they are faster, they found discriminating issues in the internet and just perpetuate and make them bigger. And so the gender view on this whole topic is really urgent that we do that.
Now, if we're talking about women who are disadvantaged, in the richer nations, we like to talk about the gender pay gap. In very poor nations, particularly post-pandemic, we're talking about women and girls being more affected by acute hunger. How do you get that together at such a UN meeting, and what's the outlook for the future?
Well, the truth is that we do have too much poorness and hunger around the world. And so I'm really looking forward that this time we have the main topic, gender and digitalization, but the next meeting we will have on, again, gender and financing. And I think that's really very wise that we next year talk deeper about these problems. The truth is we have a huge gender pay gap, and we have a huge divergence between wealth and gender. And so this is something that belongs on the agenda almost every day. Next year we go deeper into that subject.
Minister Paus, thank you very much.
Welcome.